Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I am Dr. Kane Marshall, and I'm an assistant professor here at University of Rochester. Um, and I specialize in American religions. I'm really excited about this talk in particular because I'll be teaching a class next spring on the Underground Railroad and Rochester's religious experience in VR. So I'm really excited about this. And thank you all virtually and everyone here for joining us for the Voices of XR, a Mary Ann Mavernick Studio X speaker series. This series is made possible by Kathy McMorran Murray and the National Science Foundation as part of the interdisciplinary graduate trainings in science, technology, and applications of augmented and virtual reality at the University of Rochester. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Synatra Smith. She is a cultural anthropologist exploring extended reality, or XR, and other digital tools to enhance special collections and archival records featuring African-American art, history, and culture with the specific intention of documenting workflows that can be shared with students, cultural heritage workers, and scholars interested in building digital projects without relying on a large budget or team. She sits at the intersection of researcher, gallery, library, and archives, as well as museums, which pull together the acronym GLAM, which I love. She's a GLAM professional and digital humanities practitioner. Storytelling and narrative building are central to that experience, and her goal is to identify ways to engage target user communities throughout the life of these projects through more inclusive means that integrate feedback loops and myriad learning styles. Extrapolating from the title of Bolagun Ojitade's 2015 novel, The Chronicles of Harriet Tubman, Fredonia, this Afrofuturist reimagining of Harriet's Bookshop, a Black woman-owned bookstore in Philadelphia, renders the space as an interactive VR environment to highlight works by Black artists in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, alongside often ephemeral public artworks by Black artists in Philadelphia. This decision seeks to situate this project within and beyond Ajitade's terrain of Black retrofuturism through a discussion of the needs of Black memory and institutions and the impact of immersive technologies to mediate capacity issues and reach new audiences through a speculative lens. During this presentation, she'll discuss the needs of Black museums regarding digital virtual content, coupled with the challenges presented by limited staff and resources, the role of speculation in interpreting Black history, and the manner in which technology intervention through digital fabrication, exhibit design, using free and low-cost tools can address capacity issues, audience engagement, and recruiting emerging museum professionals. This speaks to the question of relevance and the role of Black extended reality professionals in mitigating harm as digital tools increasingly permeate our lives. Please feel free to post questions in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. Lastly, this session is being recorded and we will be available to you later on the Studio X website. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Synatra Smith.
Thank you all so much. I'm really excited to share my work with you all today. So I'm just going to jump right into it because I want to save as much time as possible for questions. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. All right. Extrapolating from the title of Balogun Ojitade's 2015 novel, The Chronicles of Harriet Tubman, Fredonia, this essay explores a virtual reality project entitled Harriet's Microverse, which you can see in this image here. This is a screenshot from the VR platform. I visited Harriet's Bookshop, a Black woman-owned bookstore in the Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia, named after abolitionist Harriet Tubman. While there, I took measurements and photographs for the recreation of the environment in the Blender 3D computer graphics software program through a combination of creating 3D assets and downloading some 3D models from the Sketchfab 3D modeling platform. And I only downloaded free ones because the point of this was free or low cost. Next, I used the Agisoft Metashape photogrammetric processing software and the Polycam LiDAR 3D scanner mobile application to produce 3D models of public artwork by Black artists across Philadelphia and artwork and books in the collection of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, or PMA, and the Temple University Library's Charles L. Blockson Afro-American Collection, or the Blockson Collection. Lastly, I imported all of these assets into the Unity cross-platform game engine to develop an interactive exhibition experience. Next one, please. There we go. Harriet's Microverse has provided an opportunity to apply a speculative steampunk lens to the interpretation of Black art through the recreation of a physical space repurposed as a series of virtual galleries showcasing museum and library objects alongside public artwork. Ojatade explains that steampunk blends the steampunk creative, mechanistic, industrial world of exploration and invention and Victoria-era cultures, philosophies, fiction, and cosplay with a Black aesthetic. Whereas steampunk typically avoids engaging with issues of racism, sexism, classism, colonialism, and imperialism, steampunk directly addresses those issues from a Black perspective and reconceptualizes the past through technology and industrialization. While this project may not mirror the steampunk mechanistic aesthetic, I have extrapolated an epistemology that offers a peek behind the Wiz's curtain to reveal the intrapersonal experience of speculative VR exhibition development. This perspective provides an opportunity to explore engaging with the technical world of Black digital humanities with a transparent approach to share opportunities and limitations, as well as workflows and decision-making. I define this project as a microverse because it is an entirely fabricated experience that exists just outside of my own imagination to represent these objects in a way that reflects my own politics, preferences, and desires. Poet, musician, and activist Moor Mother Goddess defines the anthropology of consciousness to explain how we calculate the relationship between space and our bodies, our living spaces, and the ways in which these things affect the way we remember or forget our past and future memories. The public artwork included in this experience is ephemeral due to some outdoor sculptures being installed as part of a temporary travel exhibit and the murals being under constant threat of being removed through repainting or the demolition of buildings. Therefore, I virtually unmapped these artworks and offered an alternate way to view and, more importantly, experience them in VR. Relatedly, some of the collection's objects are not typically on display for the public and were made available to me with special permission from the curators and archivists. Therefore, my imagined environment translated into digital space is effectively a time capsule of a memory that existed within my own consciousness. Harriet's Microverse started as a small something to tinker away at as I developed a number of skills for separate projects. When I returned to this project in earnest, I realized nearly all of the existing artwork imported from those other projects featured either Black men or unknown artists or makers. This resulted in my decision to highlight as many Black women as possible in a number of ways. Digital artist and cultural critic Natrice R. Gaskins asserts, artists and designers can interrogate the dynamic between creative expression and information, as well as how these aspects might function differently in today's digital culture. A point which became particularly salient regarding my decisions to feature 1, artwork and books by Black women who have lived in Philadelphia in one gallery designated space. 2, reimagine a number of rugs as quilts by the women of Gee's Bend, Alabama, and feature books that I used to research them on the checkout desk and in a nearby bookcase. And 3, cover the walls in artwork by other Black women and dedicate the set of bookcases in the entry space of the experience to books that I used to research them. This approach to digital exhibit design intentionally disrupted the disproportionate underrepresentation of women artists. In order to develop the VR interactivity, I considered three key conceptual questions that I applied to all of my digital projects. First, why VR? The most immediate benefit of a VR museum experience lies in the fact that a player can handle the objects, which, with the exception of just a few institutions like the Please Touch Museum in Philadelphia, you cannot do in physical space. I added a grab interaction to all of the featured assets that allows the user to learn more about them. This immediately alerted me to a simple yet important choice that needed to be applied to the project regarding the color of the hands. My typical experience in VR had been that the hands were colored white, which negatively impacted, sorry, I just lost my place, which negatively impacted my experience as a Black woman who is rarely reflected in meaningful ways in video games, digital tool tutorials, and by or as industry leaders. I considered making the hands brown, but was immediately deterred by the thought of a feigned empathetic experience for non-Black users. Instead, I decided to make the hands Black, which was compared to archival gloves by one of my non-Black playtesters. Next, I considered what will happen when a user picks up an object in the VR environment, which brings me to my second key question. Is the project accessible? A likely unsolvable limitation to VR lies in the necessity of some level of vision in order to engage with the project. Additionally, while there are headset extenders to create space for glasses, the user's glasses cannot be too large or they will not comfortably fit in the headset. I am one of those users with large glasses. These do not fit comfortably in a headset. Thus, text narration is essential. When the user activates the grab interaction, a curatorial label, which you see on the screen, for each artwork is activated and books are opened up to a specific page. The text is narrated by a voice from the Mirth artificial intelligence voice generator, which offers a number of Black women's voices to choose from. This was important for this project as it was developed by myself, a Black woman, intentionally highlights Black women artists and makers within a virtually reimagined bookstore owned by a Black woman who named it after another Black woman. Can you see a trend? Another component of accessibility involves motion effects that may trigger sensitive users. Users can glide throughout the environment using the toggles on the controller, but this can trigger motion sickness. Again, I am one of those users. For this reason, I added the ability to point the controller and select a teleportation destination. And I do not claim this to be an exhaustive list of all of the accessibility issues with VR. These are just the ones that immediately came to mind for me as I was developing this project. The final key question I consider when developing a digital project is how the experience will be adopted. While the initial intention behind this project was to learn how to create a VR exhibition, it ultimately developed into a shareable experience with two target audiences in mind. The primary audience is Black memory workers with a goal to provide a demonstration of ways to activate their collections through VR. Harriet's microverse is therefore a model first and an experience second. I've been able to reach the audience through my work with the Association of African American Museums, which will be explored in more detail later. The secondary audience is comprised of non-Black digital humanists and cultural heritage professionals, to whom I often make recommendations regarding collaborating with Black organizations to develop VR and other digital projects. I've been able to reach this secondary audience in a number of ways, including presenting at conferences and symposia, as well as publishing this essay, which will be coming out soon. I'm not entirely sure when. With the aforementioned key questions and speculative steampunk epistemological grounding in mind, I pivot here to explore the rationale for developing projects such as this one within Black memory institutions, substantiated with data collected by AAAM, which is the Association of African American Museums, from member institutions to identify pre- and post-pandemic needs across the field to support, maintain, and grow museums, historic sites, and houses, libraries, archives, and cultural centers committed to the preservation of African American and other African descendant cultures, communities, and legacies. According to AAAM's 2017 needs assessment, member institutions expressed a desire to get the organization to see the benefits of doing exhibitions that are new, cutting edge, and bold to get people to come back to museums with more consistency and help with membership. This data resulted in the development of the Mellon-funded Traveling Exhibits and Shared Collaborations Working Group, of which I am a member. And the image that you see on the screen is from our session that we did at our conference last year in Nashville to collect some survey and anecdotal data from member institutions represented at the conference. In our 2023 AAAM member survey, which is the one I just referred to, 75% of respondents indicated that if there were no barriers, they would be interested in immersive storytelling, and 51% indicated that they would be interested in VR specifically. So when you look at this list of different types of digital tools, they could select all that apply. That's why it doesn't add up to 100. We are not mathematicians, but we're not that bad. So as I said, 75%, which highlighted in bold at the top, are all interested in immersive storytelling, and then the 51% substantiating this project for VR. With this in mind, I argue that VR can contribute to addressing these issues by providing new, cutting edge and bold virtual exhibits that account for, one, capacity issues. These tools are free or low cost, and with proper planning can be woven into the existing duties of a curatorial exhibit design staff member with limited existing technological experience. I am not a coder, I'm a cultural anthropologist by training. We are a very, very analog discipline. I learned how to do all of this as I was doing it, right? There was a teensy bit of coding involved, but it was really a copy paste. And then just in the tutorials, they tell you what to change to make it, specific to your project. But very, very simple and straightforward. It's a lot of just click this button, do this thing, following YouTube tutorials for the most part. Number two, these types of projects can also address audience engagement. VR provides a new way for visitors to interact with the collection and make their experiences more interactive and even gamified. Remember I said you're able to pick things up in the VR experience. I didn't add a gaming element to my experience, but that is another thing that can happen within the free software that I use called Unity. So there are a number of ways to make it engaging for folks. And number three, recruiting emerging professionals. Digital project development offers a new way to attract and maintain young people into the profession. I don't know if I need to say a whole lot more on that. I mean, like between Snapchat and TikTok, AR is kind of like second nature to a lot of folks now, right? So this is just keeping up with what people are interested in and making sure folks are still engaged when they come to museums. There's a number of different ways you might want to engage with what you see. And this is just one opportunity for folks who are more into gaming or tech. So to conclude this presentation, I invoke the spirit of Toni Morrison's comment, if you are free, you need to free somebody else. As such, I have prepared a shareable link with the full workflow of developing a VR project similar to Harriet's Microverse, with step-by-step instructions, beginning with the first-time user flow and links to helpful tutorials. I didn't want to recreate the wheel in some cases. The tutorials were really good, or maybe there was a specific chunk of a tutorial. So I have those linked in the, if you go to that bit.ly link, VR exhibit tutorial, all lowercase, or scan that QR code, it's all available there. And I created that as I was rebuilding my project for the third, fourth time, something like that. Just goes with the territory of building digital projects. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for this engaging conversation on Black women's memory sites and how they can be used in XR. I'm really excited to hear this and solicit questions for Dr. Smith, if at all. Didn't see any in the chat.
I guess I can start it off. I was really interested in paper specifically in kind of the applications for, recording, audiovisual history, especially for, cultures that might not have had like widespread writing practices and that kind of thing, being able to, return cultural artifacts and, recreate models of them. So that way, you can display kind of the virtual model of it and then still have things, in their proper places. And so I was wondering, because you mentioned kind of in the development of that modeling things that there's all these, hoops you had to jump through with like kind of privacy, and all these other things, and mention all of that. So I was kind of wondering, in that process, were there any times where you felt like limited by the technology in some way? It was like, I really wish this device was capable of this one thing, or this one thing it could have done would have made my life so much easier. Kind of.
Yeah, so I think the 3D modeling was a huge challenge. Number one, I had to learn how to do it, right? As I said, I was learning these things as I was creating this project and a couple of other projects. So trying to create 3D models of very, very, very tall outdoor sculptures with with a ladder that does not go up high enough was a struggle. So the top of the sculptures doesn't look great. And whenever I use like my selfie stick, it still was not able to capture the top. And so then I had to get really creative with my 3D modeling skills in Blender. I don't know why this thing keeps flipping. With my 3D modeling skills in Blender, which are very, very limited. So the software itself, you know, just that piece of it has some limitations. Also because if you're not connected to Wi-Fi, I don't think Polycam works. And so it was a lot of, you know, hoping I captured enough photos with the auto photo piece of it, because I didn't have a device that could do, no, I couldn't do LiDAR because the murals were too far away, as in they were too big. So just kind of hoping that when I got back to some Wi-Fi, it would work properly before I put it on my phone. And then even some of the, like, there's some physical limitations. There's one particular mural that I captured called Celebration of Poetry. And in Philadelphia, Philly is called Mural City. It's covered in murals. It's the first thing I noticed when I got there. It's amazing. But there's also a lot of these like lots in between houses that are fenced off and overgrown. And there might be even like a car or something in there that just doesn't have any parts to it, pretty much. And so because of that, I had to like just kind of pray and hope and wish that the model would come out right, which it did. It ended up coming out really, really well. But I had to stick the camera through the fence, like, you know, in the opening of the fence, have the camera placed there and just kind of hope that it would work. And surprisingly, it worked really well. I was very impressed with that software. But those like physical, geographical limitations of capturing some of the objects was a little frustrating. And then working with the blocks and collection at Temple's library was no big deal. They pulled everything out. I just kind of went back multiple days and captured things and had my little setup, set it up, take it down, really easy. And they just gave me some archival gloves and let me handle the objects myself. With the museum, I had to be with another person who had been trained on object handling with their specific training. I have that training from a previous institution, but not from this museum because I was in the library. They didn't feel the need to give it to me. They just said I had to be with someone else. And so that was a limitation. And then I had to like specially request permission to go and visit the collection, which was off-site. So there was kind of a barrier there in terms of getting permission to access these objects. Luckily, since I was staff, I was able to navigate that with the help of my supervisor, but it was, it did not make it easy to return. I only got to go back a second time to recapture things that weren't properly captured the first time.
Sounds like this viewing, especially large objects, is really challenging, especially when it comes to scanning and modeling. Yes. So with these mirrors, I'm imagining how was also capturing like color information of these murals and that kind of thing. And if so, how good, accurate was it at, you know, recreating these colors? You know, I see something that's, you know, it's this shade of blue when I scan it. How good are you at getting the right shade of blue back? You know, that kind of thing.
So there are a couple of ways to do that, but for my purposes, I tried to go out on, cloudier days. Overcast days worked really, really well to make sure I wasn't getting a lot of glare and a lot of like, you know, changes to the surface in terms of the color scheme across the mural. But once you know, it was capturing photos of it. So it worked out really well. I didn't have to do any adjustments when it came to color. It was just a matter of like removing the sky and the sidewalk. And one of the murals had like a mattress in front of it that had been there for a very long time, because every single time I went back to that mural, that mattress was still there. So I just had to make sure to cut all of these things out. And, you know, anything that's to the side of it so that it's just the mural itself.
It sounds like it's a whole lot of legwork. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I have a question. I'm curious if you have any interest in making these exhibits easily available online or even in other museums, and if the museum you're working with puts like roadblocks in place to prevent you from doing so.
So the good thing about coming from the library is we are always talking about free use or fair use, right? So I haven't had any challenges with getting these things on the internet. My supervisor was the library director, and she wrote the fair use policy, and she had been rewriting it since I was there. So I, checked with her to make sure I had permission to use everything. No issues at all there. The only barrier I'm having for making things public is probably a combination of laziness and I'll call it frustration, PTSD from all of the challenges I've had working on this project, and figuring out how to get it into the Oculus app lab. So I was working on that in December or January, and just challenge like issue after issue after issue after issue, and I just kind of gave up and said, I'll return to this at another point when I have a little bit more patience, because again, I had just rebuilt the project for the third or fourth time. I had to rebuild it over the course of a week. It crashed on I believe a Friday morning. And I spent Friday, Saturday, and Sunday rebuilding the entire thing and creating my tutorial all from scratch. And couldn't get into the previous file to see what I had done. So looking in my notebook to see like, well, didn't I have a note somewhere that said, so that was really frustrating. And then to get to the point of, all right, it's built, it's working. I've had people play with it. It makes sense. It's not crashing. I got a lot of positive feedback. Now let me get it into the app lab. And that would not work also as well. So that's the real challenge. In terms of like making the exhibits available online. So the 3D models that I created are available on my Sketchfab profile in collections. So there's a mural one, there's an outdoor sculpture one, there's African objects from the Art Museum's collection and African instruments from the Bloxham collection at Temple. And I think that might be all of them, because the other artworks are essentially framed images of those artworks. And the books are books that you could just request from a library. So they're not really, that interesting to look at as in terms of like a digital exhibit. But I did do a blog series on the artists that I researched for the Art Museum's library blog. And they have full citations. So all of that stuff is available there for each artist. So, but I wanted to return back to something else, which is that this is also a demo project, and it was really just to see what's possible and create something that I can show other Black memory workers to say, like, this is a thing that's possible. And so what are your collections objects? What would you want to do with them? And go from there. So I like to show this project as within that framework, so that it doesn't seem like it's, the PMA did an exhibition. PMA did not do an exhibition. I built a project just to test out these skills and see if I could do it and see what's possible. And then it just happens to be that these are the two institutions I was affiliated with. And so those are the ones that made it into the project and the public artwork.
Thank you.
Other questions?
The resolution of the images seems very rather low in the one that you showed us. Is it possible? Yes. So is this an issue when you're showing works of art?
No, I think it's just because this is a screen grab, and like even, let me see, there's another one. In this photo, it looks like everything behind it is really dark because it was kind of focused on the hand. So when you're in the experience, it's actually, you feel like you're really there. It's well lit. I have a universal lighting set up so that the entire thing is very well lit. There's not too much happening with shadows. And I think when I first built it, it depended on what angle you were looking at things. And so I had to kind of readjust things so that it would pop out of the wall a little bit more and you could actually see it. But you can read the labels, you can see the all of the artwork, you can see the book. You can even, when you pick up one of those books that you see behind there on the checkout desk, they automatically open to a page, and that's the only page that I scanned to include in the book or to include in the VR experience. And you can read it. Even without glasses, I can see it. But it's just a lot easier to read it if you have it, or to hear it narrated, because it is kind of small as well.
I have so many questions. I don't want to take over just yet, but I'll ask one. I'm interested in how using a Black woman's epistemology or thinking about the ways they know, did you have any approach to changing what a museum experience would look like? Just in that sense at all? Because I was thinking about the mural with the mattress, and I was like, that would be so dope to have that mattress in there. But I guess ultimately the question is, did Black women's epistemology kind of guide how you shape museum or, the layout? And then if there's anything else you would wish you could just hope to do and put in there that expresses that kind of sentimentality, right? This Black women's epistemology in there that maybe you couldn't. Is there anything between those two questions?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to answer the second one first because it's quicker.
Sure.
So there is a really nice, like enclosed patio area behind Harriet's Bookshop, and I actually recreated it in my 3D model originally. And what I wanted to do was to have a recording, and I had gone back and forth, like a 360 recording. I had gone back and forth about what that recording might be. At first I was thinking oral histories, and then I was thinking of recording a performance of a friend of mine who's from Philadelphia, and she's a singer and everything. And she moved to California, so never got a chance to do it. So that would be the thing that I would really want to bring, because there is no video content. And like I said, I wanted this to be a good demo of all of the things that are possible, right? And so that would be one of the things, is you can look at 360 recorded video. And I did not get to do that piece of it. And then of course, getting it into the Oculus App Lab. I would love to still do that. I'm still working on it. I just got to get past my emotions of how frustrated I was.
Sure.
Now, going back to your first question, I have the benefits of having been trained in a Black museum that was run by Black women. So I actually only know how to build those types of exhibitions. And I was in the library at the art museum, so I never got a chance to curate anything. That wasn't part of my fellowship there. So I only know how to do it this way. The one thing that I would say I did not do in this experience that we always did at our museum, it was the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center in North Brentwood, Maryland. The one thing that we always did was painted the walls. Our gallery coordinator was very adamant about, do not have white walls. It's off-putting. It makes things look sterile. So we always had the walls painted. We always had lo-fi music playing in the background, unless there was a specific playlist generated for an exhibition, which sometimes did happen. And it drove us crazy, because that meant that while we were working there all day, we got to listen to that same audio all day long. I know all the words to Chuck Brown's version of Misty because of that. So we always had the audio. We always had painted walls. Our lighting was dimmer than what the lighting is in here. But I didn't want to play too much with lighting, because I wanted things to be visible. It's easier to play with lighting when you're in physical space, but in virtual space, I don't really know what I'm doing, that much anyways. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to get too creative with the lighting. So those are the things I think that I didn't get to do. But like I said before, I took stock of, well, who's represented in this exhibition? I knew I wanted it to be a FUBU model, right? For us, by us, it's got to all be Black artists. There are 2 murals that were painted by 2 artists. One is Latine, so, but the second artist is a Black person. So I was happy to do that. I was a little frustrated with the sculptures, because even though there are so many sculptures throughout the city of Philadelphia, most of them are not about African-American topics, and even fewer are by African-American sculptors. So I ended up capturing, I think, 7. Those were the only ones I could find. And only one of them was sculpted by a Black woman, which is Simone Lee, the brick house sculpture that's on Penn's campus. And then all of the other ones were by Black men. And then there were a couple more that were about Black people that just weren't sculpted by Black artists, and I didn't want to include them. So when I got to that point of, okay, these are all the assets I have, I was like, well, where are the Black women besides the one thing by Simone Lee? I have to change that. So that's why I went on a deep dive into Black women, this, and this, right? To make sure we are very well represented in this exhibition.
Nice. There's a question in the chat I'm gonna get to before I take over again. It says, I would love to see the 3D assets in Sketchfab. Do you have a link to that collection?
Yes, I do. Let me make sure I have the link correctly. Not that. I believe it's just sketchfab.com/Synatra, but let me make sure. Am I signed in? No, of course I'm not, because that would have just made things way too easy.
I just thought I would go ahead and say hi while I'm here anyways. That was my question. I'm here in Toronto, Canada.
Okay.
And I work with a lot of institutions, post-secondary, primary school institutions in VR. And one of the things we're doing is looking at Black museums in Toronto. So seeing what you're doing is really, really interesting to me, because I think there's a lot of room up here in Canada as well. As the terminus of the Underground Railroad,
yes,
there's a lot of history up here and that connects us together. So seeing what you're doing is amazing. And Harriet Tubman was linked directly to Canada. So thanks for your work, and I'm really interested to connect with you later to see how we can sort of make some connections up here as well.
Yeah, please do, please do. My LinkedIn is right there.
I got it. I've already followed you. We're good.
Okay.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Smith. Any other questions?
I have one actually. So I'm kind of curious. Well, first off, thank you so much for your talk. But I'm curious to know what led you on this XR journey, and if you saw any other projects that kind of led you to have an aha moment, or kind of got the creative juices flowing.
Oh, that is a wonderful question. So I was in a postdoctoral fellowship through the Council on Library and Information Resources. And so they take folks with doctorates in the humanities and social sciences and place them in university libraries across the country and in Canada, in Toronto specifically. I guess it's Toronto specifically. I know that University of Toronto was one of the sites. I don't know if that's the only Canadian institution they've worked with. So typically you're just doing like a digital library project. It might be something that already exists. It might be a data science project. But I had the luxury of being the first Clear Fellow that was placed at an art museum's library. And then they partnered with Temple's library because they had hosted Clear Fellows before. And my supervisor at Temple was a Clear Fellow, which was great because I got a lot of mentorship from him. And the department that I was in at Temple was the gaming department. So that's where the VR lab is, the makerspace. There's a board game collection. The department head makes board games, academic, educational board games in his spare time, and has a huge board game collection in his home. One of my coworkers, Jordan, he makes VR games in his spare time. So I just had a lot of exposure. And at first I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this, but I'll try. And then I did a workshop in Spain called Digital something. Don't remember what it was called. But I did that workshop in Spain after I'd done a couple of workshops at Penn over the summer, one on Afrofuturism and AR, and one on creative coding. So then I did the digital something art museum something workshop in Spain, and I specifically picked the VR track. And our the instructor was from Berkeley. He brought headsets, but his luggage got lost for a couple of days. So we only had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to actually create projects, and then Friday was a presentation day. I don't think the headsets came until Wednesday. So we spent all that time leading up to there just kind of talking about all of these things about VR and how the vision works, and all the distance of your eye and the different types of spaces, all kinds of technical stuff. And then I think on Wednesday when the headsets came, we tried different games. So I finally got to see Traveling While Black, which everyone had been mentioning to me. And besides that being just a phenomenal and emotional experience, what I noticed was there was no interaction. You're basically just in a 360 video. You don't get to touch anything. You don't get to talk to anybody. You don't get to make any decisions. You're just watching a 360 video, and you're sitting at a table at Ben's Chili Bowl, which I'm from Maryland. I've hung out on U Street a lot. So I've been there, been to Ben's next door, all of that. So I was like, when you first come into it, you're on U Street. I was like, well, I know all of this. So you're watching this experience unfold in front of you with people telling stories about how they experienced travel during segregation. And then you listen to Tamir Rice's mom talk about what it was like to find out that her son had been murdered by the police and how they wouldn't let her ride in the ambulance and all of that. And I noticed how much of an impactful experience that was versus watching her speak about something on CNN or something like that, right? And so we did a number of different cultural heritage games or empathy games just to kind of see what were people doing, what made it work, what made it not work. And I just kind of meditated on that experience a little bit to think through, like, what would I want in a VR game if as a museum practitioner, what is the thing that would make this make sense? And encourage people to actually create this, because there's a lot of fear around creating these digital experiences, and now people won't come in the doors, which is we are actively working to debunk that, because that's not the way it works. It's still not the same as seeing things in person or coming to a program, you know. So I think that experience is what really motivated me the most to create something and not try to do all of the bells and whistles. Just what is the thing that makes this impactful, and go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question about audience and who this is for in your mind, who you imagine it for. Do you imagine it for the museum enthusiast or the VR enthusiast, and what that might look like in your approach to this project?
So I think this is really for institutions to connect with their like local communities, their audiences in a new way. Most people don't have headsets at home, right? And it's really marketed still as a gaming device. So if you're not a gamer, you're more than likely not going to buy a VR headset. So I always encourage these institutions, which is, like I said, my secondary audience is non-Black cultural heritage or digital humanities professionals, to partner with Black organizations so that they can build an experience and then have it available with the headset on site for people to experience, right? I'm actually working with the African American Museum in Philadelphia. That's literally what it's called.
Yeah.
Or we call it AMP for short. I'm consulting with them to help their Pew curatorial fellow build something. And so we met, I think last week, to kind of ideate around what should the experience look like, because there's the physical experience that you're standing in front of. And I told him, you know, a lot of people are not going to want to put the headset on. One, there's germs, even if you're wiping it down with a Clorox wipe in between. Everybody's a germaphobe now. And two, hair, you know, I don't want to put the headset on and take it off and continue to go about my day because now my hair is messed up. Yeah. And three, I have a friend with epilepsy. She said she is never going to try my VR experience. So at Temple, we talk about one of the accessibility measures being to have a screen that shows folks who are in the room with you what you're seeing in the headset, so that they don't have to put it on if they're not comfortable with that. So there's all these different things you have to consider, right? But you have to have the headset on site for them to experience. Otherwise, they're not going to see it. Your target audience at a museum is likely not going to see it. So that's kind of how I'm thinking of that, is just, you know, you can expand your walls, your physical space, when you bring in these digital interventions, whether it's through AR or VR. You're not limited to what's physically in the room. You're also not limited to what you can display. Some objects, you know, like prints, drawings, photographs, that department at PMA always said they had to rotate their things a lot more frequently, because the light damage could, you know, ruin the photo or the image. So there's just another way to display your objects. Or maybe there's something that you don't physically have in your collection, but you were able to get a 3D scan of it. Or maybe it was broken. You know, there's sometimes things get messed up. So now you've got that 3D scan of it where you can show people what it used to look like, or In the case of like the traveling exhibit, those objects were only here October to January. So I was able to capture them before they left, before it got too cold also as well. I went in October immediately.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Please.
if you had like an unlimited budget and a team, what would you do to either improve upon this project, or what would be your next project you try to create?
Mixed reality. I am an Apple girly. I want that Vision Pro headset so bad, but I don't have $3,500 to spend on it. Nor do I know how to develop for mixed reality yet. There are tutorials out there. I've actually gone to a couple of trainings or a couple of sessions, webinars, there we go, that Unity had about specifically the mixed reality Apple Vision Pro headset. But I haven't quite gotten there yet. So, Quest 3 does it. Okay, good to know, good to know. But what I'm trying to figure out is like, I understand what a VR experience should look like. I understand what an AR experience should look like. And so I'm trying to figure out, well, with MR, what's the point of before you have the goggles like all the way dim? Like what do I want to see if I can still see the physical space around me? So I'm still kind of thinking through that piece of it. But yeah, if I had an unlimited budget, unlimited team, I would be traveling the country, showing people VR and MR experiences all the time at every Black festival you can think of, music festival, all the things. All the things.
That's a good question. You mentioned traveling while Black, and Meg, I think it was you that let me to see that for our class. I'm not sure. I saw it in here. And then I saw the Rosa Parks experience at the African American Museum in DC. I didn't like that experience. You're literally Rosa Parks and people are yelling at you to get off the bus. And you could see people freaking out before you go. And you're like, oh, I would never. It's traumatic. But this museum, is it, so for both the Travel My Back and Rosa Parks, you are in a simulated video of sorts. Am I going to be, I do mostly work in VR, so I'm an immersive. So I'm at a coffee shop and I can see other people. Would I be able to see people at this museum, other users?
No, I don't know how to do that piece of it either. This is very much so a solitary experience. And because it's not in an app lab yet, I have to tether it to a PC. And so, you know, I can see what the person sees and kind of help them through, although I try not to do that because I want to see, can they figure it out essentially? Right. But, you know, these are my friends and family in most cases. And so they're like, well, tell me what to do. It's also really fun to watch how people engage because I'm always shocked with who finds what interesting. My sister, for example, went through and picked every single object up. And I was like, you are not interested in history. This is shocking. And she was like, this is just cool. So she picked up everything, listened to the curatorial label, and then put it back down. So you can't interact with other people in the environment, but you can in physical space, right?
Yes.
That's as interactive as it gets in terms of other people.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that. Any other questions? I have a question. Oh my goodness. I have a question about the memories you were able to cultivate. Was there an idea about what it was in Black women's history or archives that you wanted to collect? Or was it, hey, let's just grab a lot of things? Or was it like, we're going to do Black women's hair, we're going to do hip hop, how was it? Mm-hmm. What memories were collected?
Well, the fun part about working with that specific collection at that specific institution, whose name I won't say in this sentence, but I've already said what institutions I worked with. They don't have a lot of objects by Black women to begin with. Okay. I wrote blog posts for as many Black artists as I could that were in their collection. I want to say there were maybe 200, maybe 150. Yeah, maybe like 150. And I started with a list of only those that had a connection to Philly. So they either were born in Philly or they lived in Philly at some point. Mm-hmm. And as I was making my way through that list, I realized there are only 7 or 8 women in this list. that's a problem for me. So then I ended up getting the list of everyone else at that time, right? Because they're constantly collecting, so the list has changed. But I got the list of everyone else and decided to bring in every single Black woman whose artwork is represented in our collection. And then there were some that, as I was writing blog posts, either their bio or the artwork itself stood out to me a lot. Like Arthur Ashe's wife is an artist. Her name is
Wow.
man, Jean is her first name, I think. Mutasami Ash. I know that's her last name. So it was very cool to like learn about these artists and then go back and say, well, you know what, I want to feature your artwork in this exhibition experience. So that was a really engaging piece of it for me, was being able to select. I did, because of the fact that there were only 7 or 8 Black women who are from the city in the collection, I did give them their own special bookcase that has their artwork featured in it and any books that they have written. Not all of them wrote books, but some of them did that were in PMA's collection. So I went ahead and put those in there. And then there were some rugs on the ground. I'll go back to that slide. In the physical space. And I was like, what could I put there instead? And so those are the quilts from G's Ben. So that's one of them. And I did a lot of research on a number of different artists from G's Ben, Alabama, that are in the Art Museum's collection. The women, of course, specifically, because they're not connected to Philly. That means they're more than likely going to be women. So I was able to feature them and books about them. The books that were on that checkout desk are all about them. These are books that I used to research them. So it was a really nice experience to kind of just go back and reflect on the things that I had done in the Wikidata project blogging phase of my work.
So cool. That is so cool.
I have a question about user feedback. So when you created the environment, of course, there are people who used it. So the types of feedback that you have received, things that you want to improve, or maybe keep doing it for this project or future projects. So what are the feedbacks that you have received?
It's all been pretty positive. I like I said, I watched what people did when they were in the space. And the first time I had someone put the headset on, I won't say who, but the first time he threw something and I said, okay, I got to change that. You can't throw things in my VR space. Like, yes, it's VR and it's not the actual object, but that's not going to work. So I changed that.
Can you share what they threw?
I think it was one of the African sculptures.
Oh.
So, and he may have even started picking up other things and just kind of throwing them around, because he's one of those that's like, well, let's see how to break your project, right? Yeah. Like, let's test the limits. So I said, all right, well, lesson learned. You can't throw it. It just suspends in space when you let it go. There is one thing I could not figure out how to fix, which is when you open the books, it kind of opens in your face, and it made people kind of go back a little bit. And I rebuilt those books so many times and never figured out what that piece was about. So that would be one of those things, if I had an unlimited budget and developers and whatnot, fix that bug, because I don't know how to fix it myself. But otherwise, like I said, one of my non-Black coworkers, who is an archivist, she said that the hands look like archival gloves to her. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going for. I'm not going for the empathy experience. I'm going for whatever resonates, and whatever doesn't, leave it alone. And so I was happy that was her response to it. What else? I think that's all of the feedback that I've really gotten. And then I said, my friend who has epilepsy said that she'll never put the headset on because she does not want to trigger a seizure, even though there's no like moving or anything in there. It's just you teleporting around or gliding if you choose to. But so that for me is even more proof that there needs to be a screen tethered to VR, so that folks who choose not to or cannot participate can at least see what you see in the VR experience.
Thank you.
That actually, you just raised another question for me. Something that we talk about in Studio X, and especially in some of the workshops we run here, is empathy and VR. And we talk about it from both perspectives. Like, we've seen really interesting, compelling use cases that use empathy. like to train med students to understand what their patients are going through. But we've also seen some cultural tourism and sort of toxic empathy. I'm not sure if you know of Lisa Nakamura's work. She's talked a lot about this. So I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on this topic.
So yeah, for this project specifically, like I said, there's no like empathetic experience that I'm trying to replicate in here. Everybody is welcome to go to a Black museum, and everybody does find themselves, not every single person obviously, but different types of folks, regardless of their racial or cultural background, find themselves in Black museums and are able to enjoy their experience. So that's the most that I was trying to replicate, right? It's the aesthetic of being a Black museum worker trained by Black women in museum spaces that drove my decision-making process throughout this project. But in terms of what the user feels or experiences while they're in the project, I was not going for that level of, an emotional experience. As much as I love traveling while Black, it also truly, truly needs a trigger warning. I mean, me and one other person, the other American person who was there with me at that conference or that workshop, she started it a few minutes before I did, and I heard her get up and sniffle, and I said, "You're watching Traveling While Black, aren't you?" She said, "Yes." I said, "I'll meet you in the bathroom," because we both were sobbing watching that. I don't want that experience for a Black museum Black museum exhibition experience that has my name on it. I am not interested in replicating Black trauma. We see it enough. That's usually what the topic is. And so I am more interested in how are we able to show Black joy in a number of ways. And so that's probably something, I don't know if I was consciously aware of that specifically as I was working on this project, but it is something that I think about in all of the work that I do, is how can I make this something that I enjoy working on, enjoy looking at, enjoy showing other people, because I don't want to traumatize my friends and family. Like, look at this thing I built. It's horrible. As I have my Mr. Prejudice t-shirt on. I know. It was a choice.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Smith. Thank you for your presentation. I'm really curious how observing users with interacting in the virtual space has influenced maybe or even sparked new ideas for like your cultural anthropology background and research. So for example, when you gave the example of your sister who interacted with every object, right? Like I think there are probably perceptions and experiences in physical spaces with cultural artifacts that something like this might change behavior, right? And I'm curious if you've had any inspiration and what that inspirations look like.
So I really, really like the opportunity to touch objects. Even though you're not physically feeling like the texture, I really like that opportunity to pick things up, because museums just feel so off-putting and sterile when you're walking up to a glass case and then you're trying to read the label that's written too small, but then like an alarm or something goes off because now you're standing too close to the artwork and you got to stay behind this line and all of that. It's really just not a pleasant experience when they're trying to keep you away from the things, right? And museums in general just have a very interesting history, we'll say, especially when it comes to non-European folks. And so I really like the opportunity with Black museums in general, but this, virtual experience specifically to kind of undo that, where you can touch objects, please still respect them and don't throw them, but you can touch them, you can rotate them around and see the back, because there's a lot of information that is also on the back side of an object. For example, I did a project with a colleague and friend of mine, co-conspirator, as I like to call her, Hillary Witham Sanchez. We did a project called Philly Necrofutures, where she studies African art. And so she was updating the curatorial research on these objects that are in Art Museum's collection. And then I made 3D models of about a third of the collection. And there's a moment in the paper that we wrote about that, where she explains that she turned one of the objects over and realized that it belonged to the collection of Duran. I don't know how to pronounce that word. I realize now that I'm trying to say it out loud, that everyone thought was lost. But because she was able to turn it over, you could see his name written in red on the back of the object. And that's something that you can see on the 3D model. There's like even a sticker on the back of one of them it's a really small figurine, but you can see the sticker that's on the back that has like the accession number and stuff. So it's like you get a peek behind the scenes at the things that the curators and researchers get to see, but in virtual space that in a typical museum you wouldn't get to see that at all.
Thank you.
Any other questions? These are some really good questions. I wanted to ask if you had any advice, right? If someone's, I don't know, teaching a class on, who knows, Black history. What kind of advice would you give for maybe incorporating VR into the classroom, or even maybe a student who's interested in saying, they say, hey, you know what, this is amazing. I'd love to build a cultural museum in VR. What kind of advice would you share with them?
Keep it simple. Like I said before, every experience doesn't need all of the bells and whistles. You need to identify what is the specific thing, the specific impact you're trying to make. Why VR, right? Why XR? Why are you using this tool? And have that at the forefront of everything you do. Because once you get lost in the weeds of, oh, but they could do this and they could do that, you may not have the technical skills to do those things, and it may not be necessary. It might distract from the experience if there's too many things that you can interact with, or too many things that are gamified or whatever, right? Like, yes, somebody puts the headset on multiple times, there's different things for them to do, but they might also get kind of lost in the sauce. And so if you keep it simpler, you'll, one, if you're starting from scratch, you'll be able to actually execute whatever it is you're trying to build. And two, when it inevitably breaks, you'll be able to rebuild it, and it won't be the worst thing in the world. Which leads me to my second piece of advice. Take notes on what you're doing as you're doing it. Write down, link that, oh, this is the tutorial that taught me how to do this thing. And this is the workflow that I used for this other piece of it. Write it all down, because if it breaks and you have to rebuild from scratch and you don't know what you did because you did it a year ago, like myself,
wow,
that's a very frustrating weekend.
Wow. So when you're building it, and forgive me, I'm a theologian. I'm not too technical, but when I heard you talk about these collections and you sifted it through this software system or some gaming engine, when you're doing that, I lost my train of thought, but I was thinking, how are you keeping track of it? Because you said yours was weak and you lost some things. Is there no tracking system of what's going on in the tech? You all help me. You are the experts. In the building of this.
Why was the old model not able to be revived? I guess what kind of made it.
So I think what actually broke it was that I tried to open the file on my Mac Mini, and that's when everything went wrong. And I did have a number of spreadsheets, maybe it was just one or two spreadsheets, to show like where I put certain things and what information went to what. And I labeled everything really, really clearly so that I know this label goes with this artwork, or, this book ties to this subject, whatever it was. But in terms of like the actual file in Unity, that's what kind of fell apart. And I had to figure out, okay, how did I get that lighting in there? All of my 3D model assets were imported from Blender, so they were fine. Although I rebuilt the physical structure, and I think I rebuilt it once because my skills got better, and I noticed when I put the headset on that there was like a space between the ceiling and the floor, and I was like, oh, I gotta fix that. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna fix everything. So I just rebuilt it because I had the time to do it. So the models were still fine, but the actual, like, now it's a VR experience, that's what fell apart. And so I had to retrain myself on every single step of, like I said, the lighting, the hands, the teleportation, and all of the interactivity, the audio that needed to be triggered when certain things were picked up. I had all the files really well named and organized, but it was just, I had to create that piece of it again. So as long as, you know, you label everything really, really well, rebuilding it is not the end of the world, but it's those like tutorials on how to build it that you need to take notes on as well. I didn't catch that part of it as I was like, oh, we make sure everything is labeled and I know where this goes and that goes. What about when it goes in there, what to do with it? That's the piece that you should also track.
Wow. And so I'm interested now in the timing. Did you have a question? Okay. The timing of both the project and then how long you foresee a museum may last. I know you talked about, you know, some, you know, they have these curations for a few months and then they go away. Would this be something that does something similar, or would it just kind of keep building?
So I would say digital projects, I think, tend to have a lifetime of like 3 years or something like that, before the software upgrades too much and now it's just kind of obsolete. And so I would not plan to have a project longer than that. I also do not believe that digital projects have to last forever. There's a lot of folks who are concerned about how do we archive these things, and maybe we don't. The same way your exhibitions in physical space don't last forever, why does your VR one need to last forever? So I'm not really personally convinced of permanence when it comes to these. But it can last a little longer because you can switch your exhibition out and still host the digital asset on your website or whatever. There was another piece of your question that I now forgot.
Just how long it took you to complete this kind of project? Yeah, the timing.
So I started, I think, December of 2020. And then I decided I wanted to do an AR project. And so I stopped working on it. And well, I kind of worked on it a little bit, just the environment. That was done by April or May of 2020. So I started learning all from scratch how to do all of this. But that was all like the Blender piece of just 3D modeling the building. So I went and visited the site, took my measurements in December, built it over winter break, and then started bringing in furniture and painting the walls and all of that stuff. Then I stopped working on it altogether because I was totally focused on my AR app and making sure it got into the Apple App Store, which was, it was a challenge. Another reason why I have PTSD from trying to get this in the Oculus App Lab. It doesn't even have anything to do with Oculus. It's Apple that messed me up. Apple, I love you, but that was a struggle. So I stopped working on it. And then I think I came back to it the summer of 2022 and kind of just wasn't motivated. And then the fall of 2022, I decided to put all of my energy there because I knew that my fellowship was ending soon. And I wanted to make sure I wrapped it up by the end of the calendar year, and wanted to show it to my coworkers at our holiday party. So by December 2022, it was finally in the state that it's in now, which is done, but not published. And then
I don't mean to pry, but would you share any one of those kind of frustrations that is trouble, like, I guess, a roadblock to getting it in the App Store?
One, it costs money. That's a frustration. Every year I have to pay over $100. I don't remember the specific amount, but I know every year that I let it renew. They let me know ahead of time, and I have a reminder on my phone too in case I don't have it. So it is expensive, but the app kept breaking because it was too big for a cell phone. So I cut it into 4 pieces, and then they said that I was spamming the App Store by doing that. So then I had to go back and figure out how to make everything smaller. So I had to decimate all of my models in Blender and then bring them back in. And then it was fine, but getting the icon for like the App Store app, that became a struggle because the way that you're supposed to do it wasn't working. And so I had to kind of get creative about how to get that icon there. Then what happened after that? It stopped breaking. I think the last challenge was just they said I couldn't do it. And I said, okay, can somebody call me so I can figure out why? And then they let it through once I was threatening a phone call, because we millennials don't like to talk on the phone. So once I threatened a phone call, then they said, you know what? This is fine. It can go through the
Wow. Thank you so much for this rich conversation. I really appreciate it. I didn't want to leave out any other questions. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. This has been enlightening. I hope, this isn't the last time I hear from you. I'm definitely going to reach out myself. So please, let's thank Dr. Smith if we could.
Thank you all. Thank you. All your questions were wonderful. I really appreciated them. I always get nervous before these kinds of things because I'm like, oh, they're actually gonna have anything to ask me. Your questions were amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, we really enjoyed it, and we enjoy the speaker series. So we definitely want to make sure we thank our sponsors again, Marianne Maverick, as well as Kathy McMorran Murray, and the National Science Foundation. But also, if you want to continue talking with Dr. Smith, their contact information is in the chat. For those of you on chat, for those of you here, it's on the screen. And please check out the rest of the Voices of XR speaker series. And also the recordings will be held up on Studio X's website. The links are also in the chat for that. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Students, don't forget the survey.